that the Occident needs its Orient to self-represent, what he said in Orientalism. He is saying that even while we give all these societies and cultures, these traditional societies and cultures versus the modern, places that we inhabit, even when we give them a very secondary status, the secondariness is equally important for our primariness, in the representation of our primariness. That's the other thing we say, which is why the example from Jane Austen or the example from Great Expectations. Right? He's saying that this ex-convict, as long as he remains in Australia, which of course has to be made like home. You see, the idea of this distance is written in every word. India can never be made like home, and I'll come to the Uday Mehta with that very quickly. So the idea is, so you can see how the secondariness of the other, as long as his ex-convict remains in Australia, he's fine. He can be saved, he can be redeemed. But the moment he tries to, come into the space of England, the primary space of England, is a problem. So he's pointing to ways of reading, as I said, something we thought was totally aesthetic, totally, superior aesthetic, a cultural form which has never been taken seriously as something, related to power, something related so closely to social, cultural, political attitudes. Yes. So that's said. Now coming to Gauri Vishwanath. Literacy and conversion. She starts, as you know, with the debate around Amartya Sen's Nobel Prize, right? And she says something very important, that in insisting that economics should deal with all kinds of deprivation, including the problem of literacy, she's saying is transforming it into a moral science, and not just something that we think has only economic value or serves very practical purposes. So for Sen, then, deprivation is in the widest sense possible, and hence lack of education is also deprivation, and economics should deal with it. That causes, as you know, debate. He's saying the moment he suggests literacy, it gets linked to education, and there are brilliant works on education and the idea associated with, right, and it creates consternation amongst a few, right? And conversion, as she said, an apparently unrelated issue, to Amartya Sen's statement, comes up for debate during the first regime, BJP regime. And why is that so? So again, she's going back to our own presuppositions, and not just presuppositions, prejudices about, why is conversion linked to literacy and education? Because the idea is that, and deprivation in a different way, that missionaries targeted the depressed groups, right? And in the name of giving them education and in the name of literacy, converted them. So what's the idea? We're doing the same thing. It's not just what I was saying, that it has echoes in what we continue to do, in what, let's say the imperial European thinkers and politicians did. Infantilizing the different way. These people, poverty then becomes a symbol for what? Weakness. So if you are poor, you do not have the reason to think properly. Okay? And hence, whatever is offered to you in the name of education, and even, it's associated with serving food, etc., you get converted even without thinking about it. So you are negating the power to reason to these people. That is the idea. And she's saying it has a long colonial history. It's not just now. And hence, because of this long colonial history, that, this statement of Sen causes a debate around conversion leading up to. So you are, you are linking apparently totally disparate subjects or themes, in this way, how they all come together in the common frame. Okay. Now, you wanted to, so first I want your comments, because I do have some reservations about the way she poses conversion, but I agree with this basic statement of hers. I think it's an important point to make.
Similar to what I agree with you. The problem that I had with the way she's articulating the point is that there are many places where she makes very tall claims in the sense that she's not substantiating it enough. There's this one place where she's talking about numbers, particularly the number of conversions from Hinduism over time. I just look at it and highlight it. And she's not giving the substantiated, where did she get that, those numbers from? So although you are with her for the entire comment, you don't really, agree with her completely, because she's taken you through many arguments, but she's never.
And yes, and with the due respect to Abhishek, that's my problem at times with people who come from English literature. But anyway, first your comment.
Confused from what Himani says. This is the first time I was reading this piece of review. But I think she is in a way converting literacy, which is again a very Western
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Kind of critique that Nandi makes of secularism, who works for literacy as well.
Yes.
Literacy is also a 19th century engendered category that has been deployed to understand civilization in terms of literature. Again, this whole critique of mathematicization that I'm trying to get at. That's, I think she's.
Yes, and not just that, she is actually thinking of conversion. So when I wrote an article years ago, questioning this idea of conversion again as a total break. Because if you look into histories of, Christianity or Islam or even Hinduism in any country, more Christianity and Islam, because you can follow, what is Mexican Catholicism? It is very Mexican, right? What is the Virgin? Who is the Virgin of Guadalupe? So the point is, there is no rupture, because the ones who are, deciding on the change of faith, I'm with her to the point that we negate them any kind of proper adult reason, reasoning power. It is, that's why poverty, as I said, becomes a threat, and it's only through poverty. Poverty then equates as weakness, etc., weakness in all its senses, and then they convert. But the point is, we are trying to say that we shouldn't think of it as a total break, because then we completely miss out on the rich detail of the way these people, and the other thing she says is, it's a default understanding the people who are converting were all Hindus. They probably weren't. Most important. And this has been shown by studies from the time of Indian census. Since they are looking for religions, people who are not giving, being able to say anything as to which religion they belong in the early censuses, they are all, kind of brought under Hindu. Yeah. Okay. And if you look at the actual reports, the people are sending, like the census commissioners are sending from the districts, they're saying these people are so ignorant, they can't even tell you whether they're Hindus or Muslims or Sikhs or Buddhists or whatever. Sometimes they're giving their profession, sometimes they're saying we are potters, sometimes they are saying that we are Hindu Sikhs, because Oberoi's work shows that there was no that much of a clear distinction before a certain period. Often families gave the first son to Guru Nanak out of respect for him. See, so these are the actual effects of policies based on assumptions being implemented. Okay, and see how we've gone. We have not only for us, the tragedy was that we, Indian nationalist discourse could never actually question the terms being set down. We couldn't question the terms that were being set down. We tried to negotiate around the terms that were laid down. We didn't question the basic premises. No one said, no, it's, we should not think of us as just belonging to religions, being a traditional society. we didn't do that. Maybe it was not possible given the circumstances of the time. It's hindsight that we can say it. Maybe it was not possible then. But for me, that's the greatest tragedy, because that's the way we are going. We're speaking, creating division, trying to solidify our, essentialized identities, rather than questioning ourselves as to what is the essence of this essential identity. There is, as I said, no transcendental, transcultural, transhistorical essence. Why did, as I said, my parents' generation, had so much resistance to Hindi then? Because for them it was suddenly, whether or not they believed in the idea of a very strong center, but the idea of suddenly, Hindi being imposed, we still don't call it a national language. Probably very soon we will, but it's the official language, it's the administrative language. Okay, why don't we ask the question that why wasn't this raised when Persian was changed for English? Persian was the language of administration, right? Till the 1830s. It was between that decade of 1830 to 40 that in the British, the provinces of British India, Persian gets replaced by English. So when we look at the genealogies, as I said, we'll come up with newer questions. But my problem with Vishwanathan is that she takes of conversion as a rupture. And as I said, you miss out on the rich details of what, someone converting, let's say, even say from Hinduism into Christianity is making of that Christianity. Hence, Indian Christianity is Indian Christianity, vernacular Christianity, as I would say, or Indian Islam is Indian Islam. You know what I mean? So, this idea of complete break does not work. More and more, we are moving towards, as I said, what is hybrid? Gray zones. We have to think more seriously of the gray zones. And through your own understandings, through your own apprehensions of what you think are the tenets and practices of Islam or Christianity or Buddhism, what is this new Buddhist tradition? You are rendering them with newer significance. You are making something totally different than, who knows what the exact, whether even, Christians in medieval Europe practice the tenets exactly. You are missing out. You are not giving that kind of, let's say, credit to the believers, to the practitioners. And we continue to do that. We continue to do that. So this is what, I will stop there for Vishwanathan. If there are more comments. Yes.
When we talk about language, we consider English to be access. And I was wondering if there is true for religion is where we see religion also falling into the trap of hierarchy. For instance, in school, we had to read the Bible to the 8th standard as a compulsory subject. But no one questioned that. But if I was thinking if we introduce the Gita or Islam or the Quran, for instance, in school, there would be a lot of objections to that. And I was just wondering if religion also falls into the trap of hierarchy. It was that way.
It has been questioned in subsequent times. Don't think it was not questioned. There was a reaction from that period of the sons being anglicized. Young Bengal, for example, was one extreme reaction. Of course, they were all very, very young. So it was the
Arcanine story is like one character questions the entire thing. Like why a person talks down about his Hindu religion. He was a Christian teacher. He goes and complains to his father. So there's a story of Arcanine.
The thing is, again, we believe in the existence of all these 3 religions or 10, 12, 15 religions as completely identifiable separate categories, and we fix on one particular text as, you see, Hinduism, for me, the richness of Hinduism, or at least the different currents, let's say, was precisely that was not a religion of book. Right? And practices were as important, and practices varied across regions. So in trying to convert it, we are making it homogenized, we are making it hegemonic, and we are making it into very close to a religion of the book or a Semitic religion against which we are meant to, direct all our energies. You see the problem there? You're falling into the same trap. The idea of secularism meaning okay, fine, if you are secular, so we study the Bible, we study the Quran, we study you end up then what you do of the of Buddhism or Jainism and so many others. We were not a religion of the Buddha. That's the problem. And that is something, we'll come to that. That is happening in the 19th century when our reformers are thinking. What is Ramon Rai doing? Is going back to Advaita Vedanta and trying to bring Hinduism closer and closer to what his notion of what religion is. When Radhakanta Dev is been marked as a conservative in the great debate, you may not know before the most of you know the debate around Sati. What is he saying? He is saying, why should we accept that Hinduism is only based on scriptures? His group, if you read the petition they're sending, that's what he's saying. Hinduism is as much about scriptures as about practices. Because what happened? One scripture was, countering what another one was saying, right? So then what do you do? The earlier the better, the purer. So that's how you establish a lineage. And so those roots, go back to a very long time. And it is, it's immensely difficult now to, you can sit and listen in this class and we can come to an agreement. It's so enormous, it's an enormous challenge to, bring up these questions again. But it has to be done at some level, in the sense, you are the younger generation. I mean, you have to do it. Otherwise, who will, right? But anyway, so or something else on Gauri Vishwanathan? I'll move to Mehta very soon. Yes.
To what she said, that but there is some kind of supremacy which works around English, right?
Yes or no? How many of us actually speak? There is this idea that that English is the lingua franca and all of that. It's more and more for various reasons, as people say that language is also there's a market of languages, right? There's a very interesting study as to why students, if parents in Banaras want to send their children not to English medium schools in Banaras, they would send them to Delhi because their English would be better and they would have much greater job opportunities. So we're speaking of it as capital, cultural capital in a very different way. Right? Now people from the south amongst each other, and this got nothing to do with, maybe something, but not that much to do with the policies of, let's say, the central government, speak to each other in Hindi because many of them now, go elsewhere to work. And they have forgotten to learn, let's say not forgotten earlier. I know of friends who could converse, they could follow, now they don't. Like someone who speaks Tamil doesn't necessarily follow Malayalam, right? Which wasn't the case. So there are several factors. That's why I'm saying contingent. What becomes important when is extremely contingent. But if we hang on to that contingency as something essentialized, that's the problem. That it's given for all time. And forget that they all have genealogies where certain factors made them very important at that moment. Right? Linguistic reorganization of states. In the new reorganization, language didn't feature at all. So you can see the changes in your own life. You don't need anyone to point it out to you. Right? But for my parents' generation, as I said, it was very, very important. Very, very important. I went to an English medium school, but I had Bangla as my first language. And I still remember a friend of my father's, a very well-known philosopher, died very young. He said, but your daughters are going to an English medium school. He couldn't believe it. Because there was a different kind of idea that, the vernacularization of the vernacular, they were trying to challenge that. See what Banaras now, what is happening. That's the English you learn in Banaras is not good enough because your diction is wrong, your delivery is wrong, etc., etc. So you have to. I think it is very important to pay attention to the context. Now, to move to from this, I see a close connection with what Uday Singh Mehta is doing. We are questioning. We are not just questioning. We are reflecting on the problems of the universals and trying to see how they became universals when they were not, when they were the products of very, as I said, very particular processes in particular societies. And later we'll pick this up also in relation to the separation of religion and politics. We have also seen the play of power. So if you think of power as, politics as power, you cannot really make these separations. You can see, which is why, as I said, for me, Said is very important because it's starting with a novel. He said you can't think of a better, more pure form than the English novel. And to be honest, before I read Said, I didn't think of Jane Austen that way, right? I didn't. I mean, there were good points and bad points, but you've never really thought of, questioning what Jane Austen is saying, or think of, the service in the East and what it meant and how it's coming across. And so, in Blighton, for example, you all grew up. I don't know, you didn't. You're much younger. But there was the blue dragon and the green dragon and the red dragon. Till the time our friends started working a series meant for very young kids, like the naughty ones, and then you had the Five Fine Doubters and the Secret Seven, etc. And then you had the Valoritas, right? And someone said it's completely, English, middle class English sensibility, and we questioned ourselves. So why did we identify with in Blighton so closely? Maybe there was something that came across to us. We cannot question that too. I mean, so I'm saying these are the gray zones, these are the mixtures, these are precisely, that's why we have to, argue, constantly be aware of, of our own efforts to construct very pure, very authentic, very, very essentialized or very well-defined identities. Okay. Uday Singh Mehta, moving from that. For me, as I said, it still makes a lot of sense. Why? Because he's making, see again, feminist theory has questioned liberal, idea of liberal democracy, idea of liberal rights, but much later. And from a feminist perspective, because women were excluded and what is, what does equality mean, etc. These questions have been raised. What is Uday Mehta doing, particularly in this chapter, right? He's saying, I'm calling them strategies because I have two questions to ask. First, should we think that these exclusions were, a result of misapprehension of the generative basis of liberal thought? Meaning, we got it wrong when we understood it. Or were these exclusions an integral part of the knowledge that constituted that liberal thought? That is what his question. And he's saying, for me, is showing brilliantly as to how exclusion was absolutely built into the core of liberal thought. So he's saying, so what are the universals then? And where and how do they apply? And he's showing how for Locke, it functions very differently for Locke and for the two Mills, right? And the two Mills, as you know, father and son, were very closely related, right? Associated with India. James Mill, again, he is the one who's saying that you get an objective distance. There was no need for him to travel to India. If you read his history of British India, and I have read it, it's open. This idea of superiority, you don't have to. He said certain rude nations have this, wrong idea or misconception. I'm forgetting the exact idea that they had an ancient period of glorious civilization. That's how he's putting it. Tauntingly, certain rude nations have this idea.
The same person who had written the history of India in 3 volumes without ever coming to India.
Yes. So this is the father who didn't come to India, but he was very closely related with the East India Company. Okay? And then the son, as you know, was very, very important. This is James Mill, and the son is John Stuart Mill. Okay? And the son is the son who's writing on liberty and essays on government. Okay? So yes, it's a father and son. So his question therefore is that maybe it's our mistake that we read it wrong, or is it that it was ingrained? You know, it was premised on exclusion. And what is this conclusion? You tell me. What is, Damita showing? Yes, anyway. I hope you have read. Yeah. Saying that it was very much a part of thinking, of liberal thought, precisely. So it's not, it is not our misapprehension. And he is showing it, as I said, by following the works of Locke first, and it changes Locke and then the two plates. Yes, and why? Because he's saying that is why he's calling it strategies. Because if it's a misreading on our part, then it's not a strategy. But if it's inbuilt into liberal political thought, then the ways to exclude, these are strategies of liberal thought. So that's why he called it liberal strategies of exclusion. It is important. And again, liberal thought, we take it as the basis of democracy anyway. As I said, it was much later that feminists are challenging this notion, and what Joan Scott says that it is actually a paradox of women's studies or gender, of activism, gender activism, that they had to, function within democracy. This idea of liberal democracy, which had excluded women for a very long time, to argue for women's rights because there was no way out. But she thinks this is a paradox, and paradoxes you can't resolve, as you know. So that is Uday Mehta's point, and he's saying, so what then is the universalism of these so-called universals? And how is he showing it? He's saying men are free. So there's an idea of the natural nature of man. So the idea of equality comes from some vague conception, even in Locke, from this natural nature of man, which is never spelled out. But it is immediately qualified in Locke, for instance, by the importance he gives to birth. And then he quotes from Locke brilliantly, the need of tutoring, the need of proper, good teacher, good education, etc., which will later take form in the mills in a very different way, not in Locke, it's not the significance of birth. So obviously you're qualifying the very idea of the liberty of all men, natural men, the moment you're stating it almost, by giving importance to his birth, the political significance of his birth. So in the two mills, what would happen? That some people, it will come later, some people are not qualified to exercise, the tremendous rights that liberal theories give. So that way it becomes a justification. Not just a justification, it's as if for societies like India, there's no way out but the presence of the British. Okay? Because again, so that's why he's saying inscrutability. What are the two strategies? Inscrutability and civilizational infantilism. Yes, exactly. So what is inscrutability? And he makes a very, very important point. He's saying when you are saying that something is inscrutable, you've already objectified it and denied the possibility that at some stage you will be able to understand it. Whereas if you say that this is something that resists comprehension, you leave open the possibility that, at some stage it will yield to comprehension. But the moment you have said it's inscrutable, again, you have completely objectified it and you have dismissed it. It's not something that you need to ever try and understand again, because it is inscrutable. And what he's showing is that from this inscrutability, there's this change to civilizational infantilism, which is the two pills. Because again, what I see the connection with Gauri Vishwanath, that poverty becomes a sense of deprivation, poverty, lack, hunger, etc., lack of education, all make you what? Weak, infirm, like children, not adults, proper reasoning adults. Hence, you cannot exercise, you're not qualified to exercise your reason even in choosing your faith. It can apply anywhere. So what Uday Mehta is saying, that all these subject populations therefore are still what? They are still like infants. They have to be trained, tutored, guided at a later stage. So you have ruled out, the freedom, the equality that you're guaranteeing from the moment of guaranteeing it. Yes. Now your comments. Okay. No? Okay. Yes, we have. Yes.
I think the problem with these set of meetings,
Mhm.
you will just stuck in a structurist way of thinking, binaries. It's not this and it's the other. They are not able to conceptualize a way of movement between these two extremes. So in a way, from Sayar to all of them, they're stuck in a binary structurist frame of mind. So you can think of reversal, but you're not able to conceptualize the root in between or even have a reading in between. That's a problem of the critical training that these, authors have gone through. This the business of that conceptual frame of mind, which probably anthropology does not have. At least contemporary anthropology doesn't have some of these binaries.
But Uday Mehta is not really speaking of boundaries. It's showing the change from, this, dismissal as something inscrutable to, to actually paying attention. What he's saying is there's a total reversal. That what you dismissed as something that cannot be ever studied or doesn't need to be studied, to paying attention to the details. And then by paying attention to the details, you're saying that, they don't meet up to the standards.
For instance, just look at the case of Anglo-Indian. Even when you look at the contemporary novels in the 18th century, you do have these figures of the Nawabs. The people came from the West, they converted to the Indian way of living, and they were not able, they loved it, isn't it? They had Indian concubines, they converted, they had children. Look at the institution of Braham School in Kalimpong. So you did have a lot of encounters. So this way of thinking with this set of reading is the fact that they are not able to acknowledge, give enough weightage, enough space in their readings to these encounters. Is what I'm trying to point out. If it's not this, then it's something else. But actually, the space of mediation is a larger canvas, a larger frame of mind, which somehow these people are not able to capture.
Yes and no. Yes and no. I wouldn't, because as you know, I mean, scholarship has pointed to the very interactive process through which he's looking, as I said, he's looking at, let's say, some of the key figures of liberal thought, British liberal thought. Right. So he's starting from that.
Always another Europe too.
Of course. I mean, if one of the readings, I think it's Said who mentions Gramsci. Absolutely. Why is Gramsci so important? He's speaking of how to bring about, he's speaking of heterogeneity and how do you, link up the South and the North. And, we draw upon now when we speak of the global South, in a way, we are going back to that idea of the North and the South. So yes and no, I would say. Yes, but I think Mehta is much more attentive. Even Said, Because he is saying that, Orientalism, I didn't pay attention to this. Yeah. More comments? See, he's also saying that if we look at Edmund Burke, again, for me, he's a very important figure. I wish I could read more about him, more on him and about it. He is questioning, he's actually questioning colonialism, but he's also saying that, yes, of course, inheritance is very important. So for him, of course, there would be distinctions. These people are not saying that straight away because they are harping on the natural nature of man, but you are paying importance to birth. And you, as he says that a good tutor, a child is taught, in a way that he, when speaking to servants, right, he tries to erase his natural superiority. And this reminded me of, again, you obviously know him better. I'm fascinated by the work of Bernard Cohn, and Cohn has this brilliant essay called The Command of Language and the Language of Command. Right? And what is he saying? He says when the English come to India and for administrative purposes and for interaction, they have to learn the local language. What are they learning? Just the imperatives. They want to give orders. I don't know, you are, as I said, much younger, and it's a different India. When we had all these jokes, no? There was a brown crow. This is not a command for a change. Darwaza, it is. Darwaza band karo. There was a cold day. Darwaza cold day. That's what Cohn is pointing to. What are they learning? The language. They are trying to get a command of the language to master the language of command. So they just need to learn the imperatives, and that's it. Yes, more. So in for the so-called conservatives, therefore, this natural inheritance, or in Disraeli, as he says, that it's it's there's an open preference for the rights of Englishmen over the natural rights of man. They do not believe in it. They do not believe in it. I mean, think about democracy. Most democracies function in capitalist societies. So what is the idea of democracy? Somehow or the other, we have dealt with the idea, and not just dealt with it, we are, kind of happy with, or at least at peace with the idea that there would be economic inequality, right? The one, kind of strain of thought that wanted to deal with it also ended up in totalitarianism. Right? Marxist thought, let's say, Marxist experience, not Marxist thought per se, but the Soviet experience. And these would be the problems. We'll pick it up in the later ideas. When we insist again and again that these are all imagined communities, be a regional community, be a ethnic community, be it the community of the nation, these are all imagined, and because they're imagined, nothing functions only at a discursive level. It needs its material basis in some form or the other. Hence the map, hence the flag, hence the badge, the important significance of the Christmas badge, again works on that, stuff like that, and the way we recreate the nation every day, nation and the state, the flags, right? The flags in front of all administrative buildings. When we were growing up, we had to stand up at the end of any film, the cinemas, and the Janagana Mana, right?
But in the beginning, that's the beginning. So that you don't have the option to leave.
So I'm saying, but it's not just the nation. What is it that we have on, as I said? Well, you have to think about that. What and why is it that we have on this particular one? If you ask my parents, they are nationalists first and foremost. Also because it's a generation, right, that's gone through the partition and they have, been there during the nationalist struggle. Right? It can be Gandhi, it can be Subhash Bose, it can be Nehru, it can be anyone. But there's great enthusiasm for the nation. It's that generation till the time deception sets in, or disillusion, whatever you call it. So why is it that, they got so resistant to him? Right? Suddenly, this idea of autonomy, they all believe in, unified India. As I said, precisely because they've gone through the partition. And my mother was pointing out, I didn't notice because I didn't pay attention this morning, that the map your, guest house garden has is a map of undivided India. So I think you have to think very seriously about why. Yes. I mean, what do we mean undivided India, right? And I face it every time in Mexico because when, not just Trump, even earlier, they said California, Texas, these were all parts of Mexico, and it is true. If you think of the names, they're all in Spanish. What does Los Angeles mean? Nothing. It's Los Angeles, right? El Paso, they're all Spanish words. So Texas, they don't call it Texas. So I mean, we have to think of all those ideas. Someone's bringing up the idea of how has India functioned. We don't know how it functioned, and whether there are also very good works that are pointing to what it meant to be an imperial subject before the idea of nation came up. Mrinalini Sinha's work is showing that. People are writing to the Queen. The importance of Queen Victoria. Extremely important. You have it in Bengali songs. In my, history of modern India, I start with Haridasher Bulbul Bhaja. Maharani Victoria, used to have this savory every day, and she forgot who was the Raja and who was the Proja after she had it. This is a film in the 70s. No, when was Shriman Prithviraj? Late 70s. You don't even know, you weren't born. So, but anyway, but I'm saying, think of the relevance of Maharani Victoria in late 70s India or early 80s India. Why would it come up in a song like that? We forget all that. And they didn't have any idea of India. They're saying, I as a member of this great empire, I am pleading or urging you, the great queen, to take care of your subjects. And these are people writing from Fiji, they're people writing from everywhere. And we have to dig up that history too. What was the imagination of the empire and what it meant to those people who thought that they were, they were powerful subjects of a very powerful empire? That is also possible and was probably possible. So in that sense, the idea of nation is, as you know, even till very late, we are speaking of, we didn't think of leaving the Commonwealth. We are still debating about, Dominion status or total independence. So we, so there's, these fallacies in our thinking about the nation and nationalism, as as existing all along and one linear history, moving from one step to the other, they can be pointed out, exactly in 2 minutes. But does that mean that we've solved the problem? No. We cannot. One thing we have to realize, as I said, it's very impossible. Social worlds are incredibly messy. So it's not just, hybrid and mixed and impure, incredibly messy. And as I said, we do not want to end up in just a din of voices, and where we're talking at cross-product purposes. So what we have to do is be aware of these genealogies, this mix-ups ourselves. When we speak, when we write, when we just relate to the world. So, do we have time? A little more? Or would I make that good? So what he's saying is that the people, the same thing, that's why I pointed out to Radhakant Devi, was actually quite an interesting figure. Who lost out and he got marked, categorized as this great conservative, right? But he was saying that we should not convert Hinduism into a religion just based on scriptures. He's saying that it's based on practices which vary, tremendously, not just from region to region. It can vary from one context to the other. Ramanujan has this brilliant essay, Is There an Indian Way of Thinking, where he's saying that, even true, what we think is true is, holds true in a particular way for one group and may not be the truth for another. Context sensitivity is what is urging for, which is, which can be misread very easily, and by my students who, whose first language is not English also know that, Indians don't believe in truth, right? They don't do it, but others have done that. All these stories about Indians, telling lies or not. Person is saying it, various people are saying it, but the context sensitivity is what we have to, and that is what Vibha was also trying to point to, and I accept that to a certain extent, because as I said, Said's agenda was, in that sense, he was angry. He wanted to make a point. I mean, at a moment of making a point, you often have to make sweeping generalizations. I accept, right? And he is coming back to that in, in the second book in a certain way. And yes, he was not an anthropologist, he was not a historian. To be honest, I heard Kumkum Sangari speak in Germany. We were together as fellows, and I was like, at times I was squirming, with her analysis of Indian history, but I had to keep quiet. But then these things would be there. On the other hand, I had to give her credit for being a, very good scholar and academic. And yes and no. I mean, disciplines have their method and their rigor and their yes. I mean, I would never say that abandon that completely. I would say do that and do more. Right? First do that and then try and do some more. Yeah. But yes, to come back to Mehta, let me read out this bit. Yes. Universal claims, let's say, of liberty of man. Man is free, etc. Liberal in universalism, therefore, according to Mehta, is its theoretical claims tend to be transhistorical, transcultural, and transracial. But if we analyze it, then we come, as I said, we come to realize that it is, it is completely both racial and history specific, etc., to its core. So, universal claims, therefore, are based on a transcendent ontology. Liberal universalism stems from a philosophical anthropology. Everyone naturally free, as I said, and there, she's right that he thinks that Vibha is right, that everyone, it stems from a philosophical anthropology. Everyone is naturally free and therefore equal, right? Freedom, equality, and rationality, the anthropological minimum, what he calls the anthropological minimum, therefore endorses the sovereignty of the people. Okay, and Said also speaks about how democracies need the people somewhere. Yes, we first need the people, the consensus, the majority. We can debate endlessly, and which would be a very productive debate on how do we construct, what was the idea of the majority in Indian democracy when we were growing up. Sorry?
He speaks about speaking of something turns to speaking for
something, of course. That has been,
the crux of the.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And it must be when, Gayatri Chakravarti said it also, no? Speak along. And she's speaking of representation and representation, etc., etc. Not just her. This has been something. Yes, you're absolutely right. So he's saying that it is poised on an anthropological minimum. How do you arrive at universalism, right? How do you arrive at the idea of a natural man who's naturally free, right? What's the anthropological minimum? It is that, as I said, free, equal, and rational. At the same time, liberal thought or Locke, he doesn't think that human beings have natural political obligations. See how he's pointing out. They are naturally free, they're naturally equal, they're naturally, rational subjects, but they do not have natural political obligations, and that is how you make this distinction, very subtle distinction. Natural equality is therefore moral equality with respect to natural rights, but not the existence of social and economic inequalities. something I brought up in. Yes. So, political authority equates natural right and natural freedom. But the political centrality of birth, as I mentioned in law, undermines this at the time that it states it. So, as I said, this natural political equalities or the natural sovereignty of people doesn't translate into national political obligations. And the great kind of priority he ascribes to birth is undermining the moment he's staging this idea of this abstract natural freedom of the natural man. And if you think of Rousseau, it comes later, will develop into the contractual theory, etc., etc. Again, this idea of the natural man, which is a construct, total construct. No sociological description of India, nor any privileging spatial or temporal context. It's as if everything is happening in a neutral, distant, objective, abstract zone. So natural freedom of the individual, therefore, the subject of the contractual agreement from which liberal institutions derive. So liberal institutions also derive from this idea of the natural freedom of the individual. This does not lead to anarchism because law qualifies perfect freedom by stating that it has to remain within the bounds of the law of nature. As fundamental moral principles legislated by individuals and societies, legislated for individuals and societies by God, natural laws are taken as a pre-conventional limit on human action. But access to them is through natural human reason. Okay? The potentialities of Lockean individual therefore reside as a constant internal threat to the regularities needed for the institutions, the actual political institutions through which liberal representative government will come into being. So it's a constant threat, this idea of the natural freedom of the natural. Okay. Now, so what is Mehta saying of this, according to me? For Mehta, exclusion in Locke needs no such extra textual supplementing. When he said that, is it ingrained into the thinking, or is it the result of a misreading? Right. So he's saying there's no need. The moment he's ascribing such importance to birth and also to this conditioned by the natural laws of man, it therefore does not need any supplementing, any extra textual supplementing. So what is his implication? So it's not an implication. Exclusion not by implication, but it is embedded exclusion. That's my view of that. They're saying it's embedded, so that it does not have to be supplemented by an extra textual reading of document. So circumstances and classificatory schemes of sociology configure the boundary between the politically included and the politically excluded. Conventions and manners seldom claim to be universal. That's another very important point he makes. He said these are all in abstractions, but the moment we are speaking of conventions and manner, they never claim to be, almost never claim to be universal. They are always context specific, culture specific, right? Political inclusion, therefore, is contingent upon a qualified capacity to reason. And then he moves to the Mills from Locke. Madmen and children in England, therefore, there's no talk of women at this stage, as you know. So madmen and children, of course, were not, they were definitely not thought capable to exercise this capacity of reasoning. So, so they can therefore be ruled without consent. So if that's the interesting slip and the great kind of gloss. So if madmen and children in England could be ruled without their consent because they do not have the capacity of reasoning, the men and of course women of India, the subject populations could be also ruled without consent, precisely because they did not have this capacity to reason. And hence, this is the civilizational infantilism. They have to be trained, they have to be made into mature individuals. And there I agree with you, and people have pointed out, there's a huge difference between, and Ajay Skaria has a very good article on the idea of the noble savage. See, there's a very huge difference between the noble savage as the natural man, but the childlike man, and the effeminate, terrible, litigious Bengali was is effeminate. But there are shades of variations there. She's right. You cannot just say that the entire Indian population is infantile. But where do they agree that they are lacking in this, this discretionary reason to make the political institutions that representative government promises work. So yes, there are shades, but the basic premise that he's trying to bring out is that. So he's saying there's a change from this idea of inscrutability to something that has been comprehended by paying attention to details, customs and conventions. But the customs and conventions, therefore, they convince you that they are barbaric, or they fall behind, or they don't meet up to standards enough. And hence, we know the idea of a civilizing mission. Starts with women, but of course women never done it. So I'll stop at that. So for me, yes, he remains extremely suggestive. If you wish, of course I didn't scan it, if you get hold of the book, read the next chapter also, because it is also. No, that's chapter 3, yes. It's called Liberalism and Exclusion. Yes, thank you. I've been better in this one, right? But you haven't participated as much.
I think now I understand that what will happen. It will be different from here.
Comments, observations, criticisms?
No criticism, but I really liked the way you have given the details. I would have never understood what he was talking about if I read it, separately. So SAD was really helpful to get into this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
What Mohammed said, I actually agree with what Tracy Mehta is saying. He's with 2 examples, and I completely agree with him. But after her comment, she's saying that there was a difference in Europe as well. Could somebody think of examples of other European historians perhaps who have maybe a different view of India? I mean, not the same as, not as stuck in the binaries as well, or are there other examples? Anything?
Yes, there would. But not really. Yeah. Yeah.
Advantage of theory.
Yeah.
But they draw from the other Europe. We did have strands with the advantage in the West, which was not just the urge to dominate. The Ladai, Scandi, the Romantics, Wordsworth. There is some traditions within Europe, which, with contemporary environmental story, it tries to combine the two. Environmentalism again is romanticizing the indigenous. See, it's a reverse originalism in many ways.
There was a counter enlightenment within enlightenment, and there were different trends within enlightenment thought.
Also, some of Gandhi's intellectual
Gandhi included the list of reading, even behind King Swaraj, the geography. It is drawn from the other Western traditions. His exposure to that. And then this attempted indigenizing it by drawing strains from Jainism and Buddhism. That's something which I'm writing on. Gandhi's genealogy will come. Not many people talk about Ahimsa. They keep on emphasizing his strand through Jainism. But what I have written through my own research is teasing out the Buddhist influence of Mahatma Gandhi. Ways of thinking of non-violence or non-cooperation, satyagraha.
And something that strikes me again, and of course we talked about, is why Gujarat with not just Gandhi's state, but Vaishnavism, Jainism. Why is it among the most violent states in India? Not just now, it's been for a very long time.
That's a very unusual government.
What? What? Mine?
Why do we have riots in secular India?
No, mine is not Shashi Gandhi. I mean, I respect him